I don't remember why I opened the door that night. Maybe it was the wind. Or maybe it was the trail of blood on the snow. The wind tore through the pines, sharp and wild, slicing my face like frozen blades. The sky was black, the snow so heavy it swallowed even the porch light. And in the middle of that endless white I saw it, a tiny dark shape, trembling, half buried in a drift, a thin streak of blood leading all the way to my porch steps. I froze for a few seconds. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The wind slipped through the cracks of the door like a sigh from something or someone collapsing. Then it whimpered, a faint, broken sound so weak that if I'd hesitated even half a minute it might have been its last breath. I ran out onto the porch, crushing the snow under my boots. The wind hit my eyes, blurring everything, but I could still see it. A Doberman puppy, smaller than my glove, drenched bluish from cold, its belly sunken from hunger. Beside it was a red cord tight around its neck, the fur beneath stained with blood. I froze. Someone had thrown it out here to die. "Jesus," I whispered and dropped to my knees. I pressed both hands against its chest. Nothing. No heartbeat. The world went silent, only snow and despair. In my head, flashes of the battlefield came rushing back. Faces. Voices. The weight of loss. I couldn't let another life fade in front of me, not again. Not even if it was just a half-dead puppy in the snow. I rubbed its chest, breathed into its tiny mouth, trembling, praying under my breath. 1 minute. 2. No response. And then a faint gasp, like a spark breaking through ice. I pulled it to my chest. "It's okay, little one. This time, it's my turn to save you." I ran inside, wrapped it in my old flannel shirt, turned every light on, and cranked the gas heater to full. Warmth began to fill the room. It lay in my hand so cold I could feel every fragile bone beneath that thin skin. I checked its reflexes, still no movement, but the chest rose and fell, barely. I mixed warm milk and used a syringe to drop it gently into the corner of its mouth. It didn't swallow. I waited, tried again. On the third drop, its tongue twitched. It swallowed. Dear God, it was fighting to live. I took a towel and rubbed its tiny body clean. Blood and mud smeared the cloth. Under the light, I saw the coat black with rust-brown markings, unmistakably Doberman. But around its neck, the wound was deep, the raw skin visible through the torn fur. Someone had tied it up, tortured it, and tossed it into the blizzard like garbage. I sat there, listening to the storm scream outside, and realized something inside me was waking up too. The part of me that had died years ago on the battlefield, somehow that part was breathing again through the fragile pulse in my palm. "You're going to live," I whispered. "I promise." I found a small wooden box, lined it with towels, and placed it near the heater. The clock read 2:47 a.m. The wind still howled, but inside the cabin a tiny breath had found rhythm again. Each rise of its chest eased something heavy inside me. By dawn, the storm hadn't passed, but the first light slipped through the curtain, landing on its wet fur. I pressed my hand against its chest. Its heartbeat was stronger now. It stirred, let out a weak whine. I laughed, my first real laugh in years, and I named it Ember. Because even in ashes, there can still be fire. I didn't know it then, but that night, the night I pulled it back from death, was also the night it pulled me back to life. 2 souls left behind in the snow, each carrying invisible scars. And between us, only one fragile promise whispered through the storm. If you live, I'll try to live too. The morning after the storm, the sun rose, as if it too couldn't quite believe it still had the right to shine. Pale light filtered through the window, spilling across the cluttered room wet towels, an empty milk cup and a cardboard box set beside the heater. Inside it, Ember was still breathing. Slow, fragile, but alive. I knelt beside her, checking her warmth with my wrist. Her skin felt a little less cold than last night. When I stroked her back, she stirred slightly. A faint raspy sound came from her throat like the sigh of someone dreaming after a long sleep. I exhaled, unsure if it was relief for her or for myself. After a cup of cold coffee, I decided to drive Ember to Ponderosa Clinic 12 miles away. The road was still blanketed in snow, the tires sliding on ice. I had to stop twice to clear the path. She lay curled up in a towel-lined box, whimpering softly now and then. Each sound tightened my grip on the steering wheel. The clinic sat beside a gas station, a small place with a faded tin roof and a weathered wooden sign. When I pushed the door open, a bell chimed softly. A middle-aged woman with silver-streaked hair looked up, her eyes sharp but kind. "I'm Alana Ruiz," she said. "What have you got there?" "A Doberman puppy," I replied. "Found her in the storm last night." She glanced down, and I saw her expression change, the kind of look only people who've seen too much suffering can have when they meet it again. "Oh, sweet baby." The way she lifted Ember slowly, gently, as if holding a piece of broken glass, made me believe for the first time that the pup might actually make it. She placed her on the steel table, listened to her heart, checked her reflexes, and spoke in a calm, low tone that carried both skill and sorrow. About 8 weeks old. Hypothermic, malnourished, with deep rope marks around the neck, likely tied up and abandoned. But she still has a swallow reflex. That's good. I swallowed hard. Can she survive? If you feed her warm milk every 3 hours, keep her temperature stable, and most importantly, don't leave her alone. Don't leave her alone. This breed bonds deeply. She'll find someone she trusts and cling to them for life. If no one's there, she'll just give up. I nodded, noting every word. Maybe that was something I'd once needed too, but no one ever said aloud. Before I left, she handed me a small bottle and a few printed pages. Antibiotics, dewormer, and formula. "You're sure you want to keep her?" I looked at Ember, curled inside the box, paws twitching, mouth softly moving as if dreaming. I kept her alive through the night, Doc. I don't think I can let go now. The road home didn't feel as long. The snow was still white, but somewhere inside me, a small spark had begun to glow. Back at the cabin, I lay Ember down near the stove, replaced her towel, and followed the instructions step by step. She woke for the first time at 3 in the afternoon. Her amber-brown eyes opened slow, unsure, and then locked onto my face. No bark, no fear. Just a long, searching stare, as if trying to remember the face that had kept her alive. I smiled and said softly, "Good afternoon, little girl. I'm Daniel, and you? You're the small miracle that walked out of the storm." She tilted her head, her soft ears drooping. Then for the first time her tail tapped against the towel. Once, twice, then 3 times. I laughed, a sound that felt strange in a house that had only known silence and wind. I warmed more milk, sat on the floor, and waited. Ember wobbled toward me, still unsteady, and collapsed right into my lap. I didn't move. I just let her lie there, feeling that tiny breath, steady, warm, alive. That night, when the wind rose again, I pulled my chair close to the fire. Ember curled up at my feet, her head resting on my shoe. I turned on a small lamp and read through the doctor's notes. In the golden light, her half-opened eyes reflected the flicker of the flames. Each time I shifted, she exhaled sharply, afraid I might disappear. I reached down and brushed her forehead. "It's okay. I'm not going anywhere." And somehow she understood. Her body softened. She slept. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't dream of sirens or broken bodies on the road. I dreamed of a small glowing ember, warm and still, sleeping at my feet. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtain. I brewed coffee and watched Ember stretch, yawn, and stumble over her own blanket. I couldn't help but laugh. That clumsy little motion filled the cabin with the sound of life again. I stepped onto the porch and took in the cold air. The world still smelled of snow, but far off I could hear the faint drip of melting ice, the quiet promise of spring. Behind me, Ember barked once as if to remind me, "Hey, I'm still here." I turned and lifted her up. She licked my hand, then pressed her head against my chest. And in that moment I understood life doesn't always return in grand miracles. Sometimes it begins with something small, something that simply believes you're worth living for. 2 weeks after Ember fully woke, my small house was no longer silent. In the mornings, while I brewed coffee, she would sit by the door, her tail tapping softly against the floor like a living alarm clock. I had started basic training with her not for tricks, but to give her a purpose. Dobermans were born to work. Without a job, they lose their way. Sit, she sat. Stay. She held my gaze, those amber brown eyes glowing in the reflection of the firelight. I chuckled. Good girl, little soldier. The house now had breath paw steps on the wooden floor. The sound of my own voice, things I thought I'd lost forever since leaving the VA hospital. One Monday morning, there was a knock at the door. A woman stood outside in a black coat badge glinting on her chest. Renee Collins, Animal Control Officer. The wind caught her pale blonde hair. Her eyes were stern but not unkind. "Good morning, Mr. Hart," she said. "We received some reports from the Ridgehaven area about an unregistered adult Doberman." I frowned. "An adult Doberman? You sure you mean Ember?" She looked down at the porch. Ember was lying curled at my feet, her head resting on my boot, eyes half closed. "This one," she asked. "She's 10 weeks old." I pulled her out of the blizzard. "I've got paperwork from Dr. Ruiz if you'd like to see it." "I believe you," Collins said gently. "But the Ridgehaven HOA has strict breed policies. Dobermans are on the restricted list. I'm required to inspect." There was no malice in her voice, but the words chilled me anyway. I carried Ember inside, feeling the invisible eyes of neighbors through their curtains as if I were harboring something dangerous instead of a small life that had once nearly died in my hands. That afternoon, Hank Miller stopped by. He lived past the woods, an old ranger with 30 years of Forest Service behind him. The moment he saw Ember, he let out a low whistle. "Lord Daniel, she's going to grow fast. Dobermans have a strong protective drive. You'll need to train her right." "I'm trying," I said. "She's smart, learns quickly, but still wary around strangers." "Good," Hank said. "Wary doesn't mean aggressive. Give her jobs, one task a day. This breed needs trust as much as training." I nodded. He was right. And in a way, I was learning the same thing, how to trust again. That evening, Collins returned with a paper in hand. "Just a notice," she said. "You'll need to register her keep-up vaccinations and sign a CGC Compliance Form K9 Good Citizen program. If we get more complaints, we'll have to check back." I signed, but couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice. Funny, isn't it? No one cared when I pulled her out of a storm, but they're quick to fear her now that she's alive. Colin's eyes softened. "I get it. But rules are rules. I just don't want to see anyone lose something good over them." "Neither do I," I said quietly and closed the door. That night, I sat by the window. Ember lay across my legs, watching the snow fall beyond the porch light. In the reflection, I saw myself, a man too used to being misunderstood. In Afghanistan, I once dragged a young soldier out of a blast zone. He died 3 days later. The unit blamed me. I stopped explaining after that. Now, looking at Ember, the only creature who understood me without words, that memory stirred again. "They fear you, Ember," I whispered. "Just because you're strong." She opened her eyes, lifted her head as if listening. "Don't worry. I've lived with that fear my whole life. I know how to survive it now." 3 days later, something small happened. I was pouring coffee when Ember suddenly growled low, standing rigid at the door. I looked outside, a man approaching the porch, clipboard in hand. A power company worker, probably. But Ember didn't know that. She barked steady and focused her body planted firmly between me and the stranger. "Down," I said, and she obeyed immediately, silent alert, but still watching. The man stepped back. Jesus, if that thing jumped, I'd drop dead. I smiled faintly, keeping my tone calm. "She's not attacking, she's just doing her job." He left quickly. But I knew how gossip moved in a small town. That evening, Hank came by again, carrying 2 training leads. If they're scared, he said, show them control. You don't need to talk them into trust, let them see it. I glanced at Ember, her head resting on my leg. "You think they'll believe it?" "If they don't," he said, "let her prove it." That night, I wrote in my journal something Dr. Ruiz had suggested to manage my PTSD. Today, I didn't have a panic attack. Ember warned me before it came. I paused, looking over at her curled up beside the fire, her ears twitching softly every time I breathed. Sometimes I think maybe God didn't send her for me to save her. Maybe he sent her to show me how to be saved again. The second snowstorm hit Ridgehaven on a Saturday afternoon. The sky was the color of ash. The wind howled through the pines and the snow fell so thick I could no longer see the hill beyond my yard. I was stacking more firewood by the porch when the phone rang. Dr. Ruiz's voice came through urgent and tight. "Daniel, I need your help. A child's gone missing on her way home. Her parents lost track of her near the West Woods about a mile from your cabin." My grip tightened around the phone. My heartbeat kicked hard in my chest. "Are the police searching?" "They're stuck on the highway. You're the closest. Be careful, the temperature's dropping fast." I glanced at Ember. She was already standing by the door, back-arched, ears up, amber eyes burning with awareness. "Come on, Ember," I said, grabbing my coat. "No one's dying in this snow." The wind hit us head-on, freezing each breath mid-air. The trail was slick, nearly invisible, but Ember ran ahead, nose to the ground, sniffing with laser focus. Every time I slowed, she looked back as if to say, "Faster." We had gone about half a mile when she barked loud, sharp, and unlike any sound I'd heard from her before. I sprinted toward the echo lungs on fire. Down a small slope beside a snow-covered boulder, I saw them, a pair of pink children's shoes. And next to them, a tiny body curled up, hair stiff with ice. "Lily!" I shouted, stumbling down. The little girl was barely breathing. Her lips were purple, her hands rigid. I pulled off my gloves and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. There was a pulse, faint but still there. Ember circled frantically, whining with short, anxious cries. Then, suddenly, she bent down, grabbed a small scarf lying nearby in her mouth, and pulled it over the child's body. My hands shook as I stripped off my coat, wrapping it around her before lifting her up. But the moment I turned, the snow gave way beneath my boots. I slipped and fell hard. Lily rolled from my arms, sliding several feet down the slope. Before I could crawl forward, Ember leapt after her. She caught the girl's jacket between her teeth, anchoring her against the snow, bracing herself before the steep drop. I shouted, but the wind swallowed my voice. All I could see was Ember crouched low, shielding the child with her body, facing the storm head-on. I reached them, pulled both into my arms. "Good girl, Ember. Good girl." We made our way back through the screaming wind, every step a battle. Ember led the way, clearing snow ahead, then doubled back to nudge my hand, urging me not to stop. By the time we reached the cabin, I could barely stand. I set Lily near the stove, covered her with blankets, and began rubbing her hands and feet to restore circulation. Ember stood beside us, chest-heaving, fur soaked through trembling, but she never moved away. When Lily finally opened her eyes, the first thing she saw wasn't me. It was Ember. The dog leaned forward and touched the child's hand softly with her nose. Lily gave a weak smile. Your dog, she's warm. I let out a shaky laugh, tears blurring my vision. Yeah, sweetheart. Warmer than the sun. When the ambulance arrived, Dr. Ruiz rushed in. She stopped short at the sight the little girl bundled in blankets, Ember lying close beside her head, resting on Lily's legs. Ruiz shook her head slowly, eyes glistening. Daniel, if it weren't for you and her, I cut her off. If it weren't for her, neither of us would have made it. She stroked Ember's wet back and whispered, just like you, she doesn't leave anyone behind. That night, when everything went quiet, I sat by the window watching the snow bury the trail outside. Ember lay at my feet, her front paw bandaged from a small cut. I placed my hand on her head and said softly, "They can say whatever they want, but today you saved a life." She opened her eyes, looked up at me, and gave a faint huff, as if to say, "I know." 2 days after the rescue, the name Ember spread across town. The Ridgehaven Chronicle ran the headline in bold, "Doberman saves little girl from blizzard." Beneath it was a photo of Lily wrapped in blankets, her tiny hand gripping the black fur around Ember's neck. I've never liked attention, but for the first time in years I felt proud. Not because of the article, but because of the way Lily had looked at Ember that day. That look of pure trust toward a creature people once feared. 3 days later, everything changed. A new post appeared online. Dangerous breed. Warning is Ridgehaven. Ignoring safety laws. The photo was of Ember Amber, eyes, bright ears upright, taken while she stood on my snowy porch. I didn't know who posted it, but within hours the comments poured in. Dobermans shouldn't be around kids. Hero today, biter tomorrow. Who lets a PTSD veteran own an attack breed? I stopped reading after that line. The words pulled me backward back to the stairs at the VA, the whispered doubts in the barracks. Another kind of storm, just as cold. That afternoon, Officer Collins' truck pulled into my drive. Her face wasn't as relaxed as before. "Daniel," she said quietly, "I need to see Ember. Someone filed a safety complaint." I straightened my collar, forcing calm. Ember lay on the porch, head up, watching her silent. "She just saved Lily's life," I said. "I know," Collins replied. And I told them that, but the law's the law. She crouched and extended her hand. Ember leaned forward, sniffed, then gently licked her fingertips. Collins smiled faintly. "She's calmer than most dogs I meet. I'll make a note of that." Then she looked at me. "Daniel, don't let anger cloud your judgment. People fear what they don't understand." I nodded, though my chest felt heavy. As she drove away, I noticed a few neighbors at the end of the road watching. No smiles, no waves, just watching. That night, I couldn't sleep. Ember lay at the foot of the bed, her head resting on my boots. The wind hissed against the glass, the sound of snow dragging me back to ambush nights overseas. I jolted awake, breathing hard, heart racing. Ember stood immediately silent, pressing her head against my chest. Steady, warm, real. I held her collar and whispered, "It's okay, girl. I'm fine. Because of you." When my heartbeat slowed, I realized Ember had saved me again. Not from the storm outside, but from the one within. The next morning, I drove to Ponderosa Clinic. Dr. Ruiz already knew. "I'll help," she said. "I can file a behavioral report, certify Ember's training, and prove she's non-aggressive." "They still won't believe it," I murmured. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "Daniel, trust isn't something you're given. It's something you show." That evening, Ember and I walked the old trail toward the woods. Moonlight spilled across the snow, glinting off her black and rust coat. She trotted ahead, then paused, turning back to me as if to say, "Keep going, don't be afraid." I looked around the forest, the hill, the distant houses glowing softly in the night. Maybe Ruiz was right. No one believes right away. But I knew one thing for sure, Ember would never betray my trust. "All right, girl," I said, stepping forward. "Let's show them." Ember barked once, crisp, certain, and bounded ahead, her paw prints marking the first trail on the fresh snow, and I followed. Not as the man who once hid from the world, but as someone finally ready to face it alongside the dog the world had once thrown away. The hearing was set for Thursday. The mayor wanted to reassess community safety concerns after the stories went viral. I didn't blame anyone. Fear travels faster than truth, especially in a small town like Ridgehaven. That morning, the snow had melted. The sky was strangely clear. Ember sat in the back seat watching the world pass by her ears, standing tall. "It's okay, girl," I told her. "We're just going to talk, not to fight." She turned toward me, calm eyes steady as if she understood every word. The town hall was packed, residents, reporters, and people I'd never seen before. Mayor Parker sat at the center of the long table, her voice sharp but controlled. "Mr. Hart, the community has a right to know whether keeping a dangerous breed poses a risk to others." I rose, my hands trembling slightly, but my voice remained steady. "Ma'am, I didn't take this animal in to show power. I saved her from a blizzard, and she saved a child during the next one." A man from the crowd cut in, his tone sharp. "It's still a Doberman. We all know those dogs can turn on their owners at any moment." Murmurs rippled through the room. I lowered my head, holding back my frustration. At my feet, Ember lay quietly alert but calm. Her amber eyes scanned the crowd, not fearful, not angry, just aware. Then Dr. Ruiz stepped forward. "I'm the veterinarian who's cared for Ember since the day she was rescued. She has never shown aggression, only a protective response in the face of danger. I saw her save Lily Johnson from freezing to death. If that's what we now call dangerous, then maybe we're afraid of the wrong thing." For a few seconds, the room fell silent. Then, from the back, a small voice spoke. It was Lily, 10 years old, walking nervously to the podium, her mother's hand on her shoulder. "I don't remember much from that day," Lily said softly. "I just remember something warm and a heartbeat next to mine. I thought it was Mom's, but it wasn't. It was Ember's. She stayed with me the whole time." A woman in the front row lifted a hand to wipe her eyes. I saw Officer Collins smile faintly. Mayor Parker looked around the room. "A touching story," she said, "but we still need tangible proof of safety. An animal's behavior can change over time." Just as she finished speaking, a scream echoed from the hallway. Everyone turned. The door burst open. A man collapsed, clutching his chest, a heart attack clear as day. The room erupted in panic. Someone yelled, "Call 911," but cell signals were weak inside the old brick building. Instinct took over. I ran toward him. Ember followed, no command needed. The man was face down, lips pale. I dropped to my knees and started chest compressions. "Ember back," I shouted. But instead of backing away, she sprinted to the door, barking in steady, rhythmic bursts like a beacon. Collins caught on immediately and ran toward the sound. "This way. Bring the medics through the side entrance." By the time the paramedics rushed in, I was still pressing the man's chest while Ember stood guard, blocking the crowd from closing in. A heartbeat returned just in time. The man gasped, eyes opening in shock. When the ambulance finally pulled away, silence swept through the hall. Ember stood beside me, head slightly lowered, tail flicking, once calm and proud. Mayor Parker stepped down from the dais, her gaze softening as she looked at the dog for a long moment. "I used to think fear kept us safe," she said quietly. "Maybe. I was wrong." She signed the paper on the table. "By the authority vested in me as mayor of Ridgehaven, I hereby approve Ember's stay under the supervision of Dr. Ruiz and the Animal Control Department." Applause broke out, not loud, but genuine. I bent down and whispered, You just won your first court case, little girl." Ember lifted her head and brushed her nose against my hand. That afternoon, as we left the building, I turned back to read the sign over the gate, Ridgehaven Town Hall built on trust. I let out a quiet laugh. Maybe today that word trust had finally been redefined. Not by law, but by heart. Spring came early that year. The snow melted faster than usual, revealing damp earth and the first soft blades of green. I sat on the porch steps, a cup of coffee in hand, watching Ember run across the yard, her stride strong, her black coat gleaming beneath the sun. No one called her dangerous anymore. Children from town would stop their bikes at the gate to watch her. Some adults came by with snacks just to see her bow her head politely before returning to lie beside me, as if to say, "I'm fine now." Thank you. Everything changed after that hearing. Not just for Ember, for me too. One morning, I received an envelope from the Veterans Affairs office. Inside was a letter confirming my condition was significantly stabilized, no longer requiring mandatory treatment. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in nearly 8 years. Dr. Ruiz still visited once a month. She called Ember the most beautiful exception she'd seen in 3 decades of practice. And I would always reply I didn't train her. She trained me. Ruiz would smile. Maybe so. One afternoon in May, Lily and her mother came to visit. The little girl brought a watercolor painting. In it, there was a man standing in the snow beside a black dog with glowing golden eyes. Beneath the picture, in uneven handwriting, Lily had written, "She kept her promise." I asked softly what promise was that. Lily smiled. "The one you made that night? If you live, I'll try to live too." You kept it, didn't you? My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. I just reached down and placed my hand on Ember's head. She looked up and touched her nose to my palm, just a small gesture, but it carried a universe of meaning. That evening, as the breeze carried the scent of wet wood and new grass through the cabin, I sat by the fireplace and wrote the final line in my journal. The day I pulled her from the snow. I thought I was saving a dog, but the truth is, she saved me from the storm inside my own heart. I closed the notebook. Ember lay at my feet, breathing softly. The fire flickered, and the wind whispered through the trees. I looked at her and said quietly, just loud enough for her to hear, "Thank you for not leaving me behind, and I promise I'll never leave you." Maybe it wasn't me who saved Ember. Maybe it was she who saved me from fear, from sleepless nights, from a faith I thought was lost. That night in the storm, amid blood and snow, I pulled a fragile life back from the edge, and somehow she pulled me back from my own darkness. 2 souls left behind, 1 broken man, 1 abandoned dog, found each other through a single fragile breath. And from that day on, I understood one thing sometimes all a life really needs is a second chance. Have you ever saved a dog? Have you ever looked into its eyes and seen fear, loneliness, and yet a flicker of hope still shining there? If you have, tell that story. Write it in the comments, because maybe, just maybe, your story will help someone else open their heart one more time. Don't let them be forgotten. Don't let any life fade away in loneliness. Because when you save a small, helpless creature, you're not just saving it from the storm, you're saving the best part of yourself. My name is Daniel Hart, and this is the story of Ember, the story of the second chance we gave each other.